I couldn't even open the fridge without hearing the humming silence. That's how quiet the house became after he left. No keys clinking in the bowl, no footsteps coming down the stairs. Just me, the medication schedule taped to the wall, and a voicemail from my bank I hadn't dared to open yet. I knew what it was. Somewhere deep in my gut, I already knew he drained the account. But still, I had to see it. I logged in, hands trembling, and there it was, nearly empty. Our joint account, the one we built over years. I hadn't bought anything lately, just groceries, a few hospital co-pays. But now, there was a charge for a hotel, another for flights, and then a transaction that said, luxury auto rental. My chest tightened. While I was hooked up to IVs and struggling to keep food down, he was riding around like a bachelor on vacation. I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe for a second. My body had been through worse. But that betrayal, that kind, it was something else entirely. I dialed his number, still half hoping there was a mistake, maybe a scam, maybe a hacker. But the call went straight to voicemail, not full, not off, just deliberately ignored. That told me everything. He knew what he did, and he wasn't coming back. At least, not yet. Not until I got better. Because that's what they all think. That when you're sick, you're powerless. That you won't fight back. That you'll quietly disappear beneath your hospital blankets and IV poles. He didn't count on one thing. I may have been weak, but I was far from finished. I sat there for hours, staring at that bank screen, watching the numbers taunt me. Rent, food, medicine. I started listing them out like I was still in control. But I wasn't. He'd taken that from me. I scrolled through the transactions again, heart thudding louder with each swipe. It wasn't just betrayal. It was precision. He had planned this. Right before my treatment began, he started moving small amounts to another account. I had trusted him so blindly I hadn't noticed. Then, when the doctor said, "You'll need a few weeks of rest," he took it as a cue, not to care for me, not to be my rock, but to vanish. Clean. What kind of person does that? What kind of man smiles at your bedside, kisses your forehead, and the next day uses your insurance payout to book a suite in Vegas? It made me sick in a different way. Not the cancer, not the nausea, but this hollow betrayal that made me feel like a stranger in my own home. And just when I thought I was alone, my sister called. She'd seen something, a photo, him, on social media, arms around a woman I didn't recognize, champagne in hand, a tag that read, "I have freedom." I didn't flinch. I whispered a thank you, hung up the phone, and stared at the wall. This wasn't just a breakup. It wasn't even a scandal. It was an awakening. If this was the version of him that emerged when I was at my weakest, then I had been in love with a ghost. And now, that ghost had just given me the perfect reason to come back stronger. I remembered the way he looked at me before I started treatment. Not with pity, not even concern, but annoyance. As if my diagnosis was a personal inconvenience. He didn't say it aloud, but I saw it in every sigh, every distracted nod while I talked about my prognosis. "You'll be fine," he said once, scrolling through his phone. "It's not like it's terminal." I had brushed it off back then. I thought maybe he was scared. Maybe it was his way of coping. But now, I see it for what it was. He didn't want a sick wife. He wanted freedom. And he took it the moment he saw me too weak to protest. Every text message he left unanswered. Every doctor's appointment I went to alone. Every quiet dinner where I pushed food around and he barely looked up. It all started adding up. He was already halfway out the door long before he left. And yet, he had the audacity to leave a note. Just one sticky note on the fridge. You'll understand someday. No name, no apology, just cowardice, wrapped in arrogance. And the worst part, for a few hours, I believed I had done something wrong. I thought maybe I was too needy, too emotional, too broken. But something inside me snapped. I wasn't broken. I was betrayed. There's a difference. And if you've ever been in that place, sick, vulnerable, abandoned, you know exactly what I mean. That quiet moment when you stop crying and you start rebuilding, brick by brick, not to win him back, but to make sure no one ever gets to break you that way again. If this story resonates with you, please hit like and subscribe. It helps more people discover these true stories of silent power. I didn't wake up one morning and suddenly become strong. No, it was gradual, like pulling myself out of wet cement, inch by inch. But something shifted the day I walked into that pharmacy alone. I needed new meds, the kind insurance only partially covers. I stared at the price and hesitated. The old me would have panicked, called him, begged him to fix it. But there was no one left to call, so I paid, full price, with his emergency card that he forgot to cancel. Funny how the man who drained our savings left behind just enough rope to fund my healing. And that's when it began. The slow, steady reclaiming of my life. I didn't splurge. I invested. In my body, my recovery, my space. Healthy meals. Physical therapy. A better bed. Clean, calming candles that didn't remind me of hospital corridors. And yes, eventually, new clothes. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I had stared at myself in sweatpants for too long, wondering if I'd ever feel like a woman again. Each purchase wasn't revenge, it was resurrection. Then came the texts, months later, out of nowhere. Why are there charges on my card? Are you using my money? What are you buying that costs that much? I didn't respond. Not yet, because when you rise quietly, they always come back, confused, threatened, or both. He left me empty and expected me to disappear. Instead, I was rebuilding a life he couldn't afford to be part of anymore. His messages became louder, not in volume, but in desperation. We need to talk. You're being irresponsible. I left because I couldn't watch you suffer. That last one almost made me laugh, as if he had been the victim, as if abandoning your wife during chemo was an act of mercy. I didn't answer, not because I was afraid, but because silence speaks louder when it comes from someone who used to beg. He thought he still had power over me, the power of shame, of guilt, of fear. But those strings, I had cut them one by one. And yet, part of me wanted him to see, to witness what he'd thrown away. So I posted a photo, just one. Me, smiling, no wig, no filter, just light in my eyes he hadn't seen in years. I didn't tag him, didn't mention his name, but it worked. You look different, he texted. I knew what that meant. He couldn't believe I didn't just survive. I glowed. I wasn't waiting by the door. I wasn't asking for closure. I was the closure. And then came the question that truly revealed his panic. Are you seeing someone? That's when I realized he hadn't come back to apologize. He came back to reclaim what he thought he still owned. My loyalty, my silence, my future. But I had already given all of that to someone else, myself. I wasn't expecting the knock. It was late. Quiet. The kind of hour when the world feels asleep and safe. I opened the door slowly, and there he was, holding a folder thick with printed receipts. His face looked tired, but his eyes weren't sorry. They were calculating. We need to talk, he said, like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't vanished with my trust and our savings. I didn't invite him in. He stepped inside anyway, That folder hit my kitchen table like a gavel. "You've been spending," he accused. "You're not even working." I didn't flinch. "You're right," I said calmly. "I've been healing." That's when his voice rose. "With my money," he snapped, like it wasn't our money once, like I hadn't earned every cent beside him through years of compromise, support, and sacrifice. "You left," I reminded him, "and that card still had my name on it." He scoffed. "I was stressed. You don't understand how hard it was for me." That word again, me. It was astonishing. This man could abandon a sick wife, fly off with another woman, and still show up expecting sympathy, as if I owed him an explanation. But I wasn't there to defend myself. Not anymore. I listened. I let him pour out his twisted version of reality, because I knew something he didn't. This wasn't the beginning of a fight. It was the calm before the storm, and I had all the power now. He just hadn't realized it yet. He flipped through the receipts like a prosecutor. Organic groceries, spa sessions, a silk robe, each word coded in disgust, as if self-care were a crime. I didn't respond. Not at first. I let the silence stretch, watched him squirm under the weight of his own insecurity. "You were supposed to be resting," he snapped, "not playing queen." That's when it hit me. He wasn't mad about the money. He was mad that I wasn't suffering the way he expected, that I dared to look at peace without him. "I didn't buy a robe to impress anyone," I said finally. "I bought it because, for the first time in months, I wanted to feel like I mattered again." He rolled his eyes. "You're being dramatic." That word, dramatic. It's what men like him use when they can't handle a woman choosing herself. It's what they say when your pain becomes too inconvenient. I almost pitied him. Almost. Because here's the truth. He needed me to feel indebted, to feel guilty, to feel small. That was the only way he could justify what he did. But when you've stared death in the face, shame becomes irrelevant. I didn't survive cancer just to explain myself to a man who abandoned me for champagne and selfies. He wanted me to account for every dollar I'd spent. I wanted him to account for every ounce of love he threw away. And trust me, he couldn't afford it. He stood there waiting for a fight, but I gave him peace, the kind that terrifies men like him. I collected the folder of receipts, flipped through them slowly, and smiled. "You wanted proof I was alive," I said. "Here it is." I handed him the stack, not to concede, but to dismiss him. "Frame it, burn it. I don't care. Because while you were out living your freedom fantasy, I was here doing the work, healing, rebuilding, surviving, and now, thriving." He tried one last time. "We can work this out. We were good once." That almost made me laugh. Once. Before I got sick. Before I needed him. Before he failed the simplest test of love, staying. "You left when I needed you most," I said, calmly but firmly. "That's not something we work out. That's something I walk away from." His face dropped. He hadn't expected clarity. He came prepared for tears, screams, drama. But he forgot. I didn't scream anymore. I smiled. He took the folder and walked out slowly, still holding the door like he thought I'd chase after him. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. The silence that used to haunt me now wrapped around me like armor. That night, I slept better than I had in months, because closure doesn't always come from forgiveness. Sometimes it comes from a door clicking shut, and knowing you'll never open it again. In the weeks that followed, I started noticing something strange. Joy. It arrived in small moments at first. A morning without pain. A full night of sleep. Cooking a meal that didn't taste like cardboard. And then came the deeper shifts. I began volunteering at the clinic that once treated me. helping other women find their footing after diagnoses that threatened to undo them. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was becoming someone new, someone he wouldn't recognize. I restructured everything, my finances, my routines, my home. I cut ties with mutual friends who only called to gossip. I even changed my number, not out of spite, out of peace. I wanted a circle that saw me as more than a woman left behind. I wanted to be surrounded by people who respected what it takes to come back from nothing. Not just financially, but emotionally. And I met them. One by one, people came into my life who didn't ask what I lost. They asked what I was building. And I was building everything, from the inside out. Confidence, purpose, grace. I didn't need him to witness it. I didn't need anyone's approval, because once you save your own life, no one gets to define it for you again. He took money, love, time, but he couldn't take me. Not anymore. I knew eventually he'd hear about it. The foundation, the one I started quietly, in my own name, funded not just by what was left of our joint account, but by the compensation I fought to receive, legally. Turns out, when you abandon a spouse during medical crisis and drain shared funds, there are consequences. It took time, paperwork, and a lawyer who believed in my story, but I got it. Justice. And with it, I did what he never could. I gave back. The foundation supports women recovering from critical illness who've been abandoned or financially abused during treatment. It's small, local, but powerful, and it's mine. Every dollar he thought I was wasting went into building something that matters, something he'll never be part of. He found out through a shared acquaintance, someone who had donated. "She's incredible," they'd said, unaware of our past. He called me that night. Voicemail, of course. "I saw what you did. You didn't have to make it so public. This feels personal." It was personal, just not in the way he thought. It wasn't revenge. It was truth. My existence, my healing, was no longer about him. He wanted me invisible. I made sure I was unforgettable. And the best part, I never mentioned his name. Not once. Because I didn't need to destroy his image. I just had to build mine, and let the contrast speak for itself. When he called again, I didn't answer. Not right away, but something in his voice was different this time. Not angry, not entitled, just quiet. "Can we meet?" he said. "One conversation, please." I sat with that message for days. I didn't owe him anything, but part of me wanted to see his face, not for closure, for confirmation, that I had truly outgrown the man I once thought was my forever. So I chose the place. Not a cafe, not a park, a women's center, my center. He arrived early, dressed too formally, like he was preparing for a job interview. He looked around the room, bright, filled with art, laughter echoing from a nearby workshop. "You built all this?" he asked, small. I nodded. "With the money you left behind." I watched the words settle over him, heavy, undeniable. He stared at the floor. "I didn't know you were this strong," he murmured. I tilted my head. "You never asked." He wanted something, maybe forgiveness, maybe recognition, but I didn't offer either. I gave him truth. "You didn't break me," I said gently. "You just reminded me I was never yours to keep." He blinked, and I saw it, not regret, but realization. That the woman in front of him wasn't his mistake. She was his lesson. And this time, I was the one who stood and walked away first. After that day, something unexpected happened. My story began to circulate. Women who came to the center started asking, "Is it true you were left during treatment? Did you really build this alone?" I never offered details. I didn't need to. but I saw something shift in their eyes when they looked at me. Hope. Not because I was perfect or healed or rich, but because I was proof. Proof that being discarded doesn't mean being destroyed. That abandonment isn't the end. Sometimes, it's the beginning. I started speaking quietly at recovery groups, sharing only what mattered. How to rebuild bank accounts and boundaries. How to identify gaslighting hidden behind "I was just stressed." How to find your reflection again when someone's tried to erase it. I never named him. I never exposed photos or posts. Because true power doesn't come from pointing fingers. It comes from owning your narrative and letting your peace speak louder than your pain. One evening, after a group session, a woman hugged me and whispered, "You gave me back my voice." I smiled, because I knew exactly what she meant. There had been a time when I couldn't even hear my own heartbeat over the noise of betrayal. Now, I was helping others reclaim theirs. And the funny thing, every woman who rises because of that center is a silent echo of the life he thought he ruined. I don't need revenge. I have legacy. It came on a rainy Tuesday. No subject line. Just a short email. I wish I had done things differently. I'm sorry. I see now what I lost. I stared at the words for a long time. Not because they hurt, but because they didn't. There was a time I would have printed that message, clutched it to my chest, read it over and over like a prize. But now, it felt like a museum piece, a fossil from a life I no longer lived. I didn't reply. Not out of spite, out of clarity, because some messages don't need responses, they just need silence. He didn't get closure, he got understanding. And I got the final word, without ever typing a single letter. I archived the email, then poured myself a cup of tea. That's what healing looks like. Not drama, not revenge, but choosing peace when chaos comes knocking again. Later that day, I stood by the window and watched the rain fall. Each drop was a version of me I had let go, the desperate woman, the sick wife, the betrayed partner, and what remained, a woman rooted in self-worth, not loud, not flashy, but grounded. Some would say I was too quiet in my comeback, but I say, sometimes the loudest victory is never needing to look back. Barely looked up when she asked, "Reason for the name change?" I smiled. "Restoration." She paused, then nodded as if she understood something deeper. And maybe she did. Because it wasn't about shedding him. It was about reclaiming me. The girl I'd left behind when I married him. The one who had dreams and fire before she ever made room for someone else's comfort. I signed the papers with a calm hand, no shaking, no second thoughts. And as I left that building, I felt taller. Not because of what I left behind, but because of what I had finally returned to. Myself. The name he used to belittle me in arguments, the one tied to his credit cards, his betrayals, his silence, no longer mine. And I didn't need to tell anyone, not even him. This moment was mine and mine alone. I celebrated quietly. A walk through the bookstore. A coffee by the window. A text to my sister that simply said, "It's done." She replied with 3 words that said everything. "You came back." But I hadn't just come back. I had become a new version of the woman who once thought survival was the end. Turns out, it was only the beginning. A year later, I was invited to speak at a conference, not as a victim, not even as a survivor, but as a founder, as someone who turned devastation into direction. I stood on a small stage, under soft lights, and told my story, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I spoke of illness, of abandonment, of waking up to an empty home and an even emptier account. But more importantly, I spoke of rebuilding, of becoming, of how the woman they saw standing there wasn't forged in luxury, but in solitude, in silence, in slow and stubborn self-love. When the applause came, I didn't cry. I closed my eyes for a moment and let it wash over me, not as validation, but as recognition that everything he tried to erase had become unerasable. After the event, a young woman approached me. "How did you forgive him?" she asked. I smiled softly. I didn't. I forgave myself for letting someone like that define my worth. That was the real closure, not an apology, not a reunion, but a quiet understanding that I was always whole, even when someone made me feel shattered. So if you're watching this, and you've been broken, betrayed, or left behind, know this: you are not ruins. You are the foundation of something unshakable. They may try to write you out of your own story, but you hold the pen now. And sometimes, the most powerful sentence is the one you never say aloud. Thank you for watching until the end. If you've ever lived through something similar, share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because sometimes the loudest impact is made in silence.